Hi and welcome back to the Training121 PODCAST. First of all, we'd really like to thank everyone for the support we got for the first episode. It was really positive from everyone, and any feedback that's been given to us, whether it be comments on Instagram or anything like that, we obviously take it on board. We'll try obviously look to improve this show, I suppose we can call it, each week. Before we start this episode, if you're watching on YouTube, if you wouldn't mind giving us a like and a subscription, and then if you're listening to this on Spotify, SoundCloud or Apple Podcasts, a review and obviously listening to it on them platforms, we'd greatly appreciate it. So, episode 2, this was sparked by David Silva retiring this season in the Premier League.
By Michael Carden.
Yeah, we'll give him a shout out. Yeah. And what we're going to look at, so he was obviously asking about David Silva and how he kind of ranks among Premier League great midfielders. So what we're going to do is kind of rank him and some other modern midfielders, so current players in the Premier League, and we're going to kind of use the English trio of Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes, the typical debate, to kind of rank them in relation to that. So we've obviously, so you were talking about how we're going to rank them,
because it's all just it's all opinion based for most of these things and kind of who you support and stuff. So like when you talk about the Gerrard and Lampard Scholes debate, I definitely sway towards Scholes, so that's only because I'm a United fan though. So for these, it's very difficult to rank. I think the best way to do it, we classified it into 5 different things that you can kind of base it off, because obviously with opinion, sometimes some players like certain aspects, or spectators like certain aspects of certain players, and that's just opinion. But 5 things to go off. You have them listed there, don't you? Like individual performances, then that kind of ranks statistically, then how they rank among the best, then team accolades, so if they win titles and all that type of stuff, kind of how they fit into their system as well, and then that can also be how they revolutionise certain things. Like we won't go into detail with the likes of Patrick Vieira because it's not so modern, but how he changed football in a greater sense in the Premier League. So that type of influence. So there's one more, is there? No?
Individual accolades as well. So player of the month.
So things that when they take it, you look at Bruno's impact and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to grade them on each different thing. To get an overall view, we kind of have statistics on basically everything that they do, and then we're going to talk about our opinion on each subject, and then whether or not they rank amongst the 3 English boys. So
and all the stats are all off just the Premier League, because we could go
down
open a can of worms. We went every comp
purely just for Premier League ranking,
just obviously make it. Do you want any opening statements?
I think when you're debating any sort of players, I find that English debate thing is quite frustrating about Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes. There's far too much bias in it, and I find people have a real ego when they're discussing football. Like, for example, about a Scholes or a Gerrard, you're like, you never seen him play before, but I did, and that's why he's a better player than David Silva. I think there's a lot of ego comes into selecting players, particularly over opinions, because some people I've seen Gerrard play during that era and you didn't see him play in that era, and I find people sort of tie on to the nostalgic era. There's nothing like football back then. I was football is not the same as back then. It's a different game entirely. So eliminating bias is the big thing, I think, when you're trying to pick some sort of squad. Not even a squad, just players. Just ranking players in general. So
I mean, with these 3, let's be real. If you're not a fan of any of the 3 clubs, we're obviously all United fans, you would take any of them.
Absolutely.
If I picked one out of a hat and you could have that player in your team, you wouldn't say no.
They all have
they're that close
characteristics. That's the thing. They're all individual. They all play in the same position. It's the same with who we're going to discuss today. They all play in the same position, but they're all completely different humans. And I think one thing that they all have in common, maybe some of them that they probably won't get ranked when we talk about later on, is that Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes, consistency for years. 10 years they were the best in the Premier League, and even in Europe at times when they stepped up, especially even Gerrard. In Europe he was outrageous, although he didn't have a good squad and thing, and that's another thing you have to discuss, the players they have around them, and that's kind of what one of them is about, playing in their system. Does it work? And David Silva in United, a couple of years ago, just wouldn't have worked. It's when we had Mata, it just wouldn't work. So how they work in their system is huge. So the players you have around them is also important. But over the couple of years, if they can be consistency, I don't think they're in this conversation without being consistent to some degree, and maybe it might let them down once we talk about it.
So we'll we'll probably kick straight into the stats, and then we'll take it out from there. So we'll talk about Silva, obviously, because he was the one that kind of first came to mind when we were talking about this. So stats we're going with are appearances, goals, assists, wins, losses. So obviously that's more of a team stat, and then we've kind of got we have their titles as well, so if they won a league or whatever it might be, and then there's some interesting stats for each player, and it'll be interesting when we get into that, talking about like passes per game and how Silva is different to Gerrard and things like that. So just with Silva, he played 309 Premier League games, 60 goals, 93 assists, won 214 games and lost 50.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous stats. Well, before we even get into the statistics, do you rank him amongst the three? Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes?
I think it's a bracket of 8. He's definitely in that 8. I would say anyway. Top 10. Top 10.
I definitely have him somewhat up there. Like in almost every like characteristic of what we discussed there. The influence he had over City was incredible at the time. He was the pivotal person in there that made them tick for years. So it's interesting. But yeah, I think, in my opinion, what would be that he's thereabouts. He's a completely different player to the three of them.
Yeah.
But with the way he played in City's system,
there wasn't players like him back then.
No.
He nearly revolutionised. Like, when he came in, it was like this small.
So that's
Spanish
why
football.
I think that's why he ranks
culturally significant.
He just like when Vieira came in, Silva started coming in then for City, and then all of a sudden they just became unbeatable. So they had players. Obviously they had great players around them. Don't get me wrong, but he was the main one that made them tick for years. Like, you remember they destroyed United, and and he was running the
would you pass to Dzeko? Do you remember the volley at the 6-1? Oh my god!
Don't mind. Would that be added as a sixth component then for ranking? Would be cultural significance.
Yeah, it's kind of like
like Gerrard would be a hero in Liverpool.
Yeah. So like that kind of ranks. I think I said at the start something like in their system. That's kind of like fixed in with that. Like,
sorry, I don't want to be going on a tangent here. No, we're taking a broader lens. Like football, like even just going by our conversation last week about like football being a tool for life. I think if you can be a culturally significant icon in a city, surely that's worth more than winning a Premier League title. You know, if you're able to positively influence whatever population there is in Liverpool and then the greater England and the world, surely that has to be worth its weight in gold.
Like, I had written down cultural impact on the league, and then you could even, like you've said, on a city as well is interesting.
But go on with David Silva there, bro.
So there's one really interesting stat, and this one I remember I was chatting to you about this last week, where talking about his tackle percentage, which again you can't really read too much into stats. Sometimes it's what you see with your eyes, but from his 309 games he made 380 tackles with a 71% success rate. Now, just so that's not an empty statistic, to compare that to Van Dijk, he has a 70% success rate from 184 tackles from 157 games. So it's not like he's done a crazy amount more. And I think, you know what you're going to say here.
Yeah, the tied in, how he fits into that system. Like the way, even the last couple of years with Pep and stuff, their counter press, Silva was huge part of that, and winning the ball back. And people give out about how City play sometimes, that as soon as they turn over possession, within 3 seconds they either win the ball back or they foul. And he was huge. He's very good at nicking the ball. Like in high areas, when they press high, he's so good at it. So it's a very interesting stat. So that not only just shows, like, I think you forget with the likes of David Silva and Bruno and all that type of stuff, those types of players. I always say Bruno just because he's currently doing it, but their impact not just on the offensive style of play, but when they're defending and how he fits into that system. He's bought into not obviously creating goals, scoring goals, and just being a link player. Defensively, he was absolutely brilliant at, like, just picking little pockets or turning over possession constantly, making things awkward. So that's a huge thing, to have the offensive end of things and then to be able to influence the defensive side of play as well. It's a huge, it's really interesting stat to have, obviously. But if you were to watch that with it, like if you really honed in when he was playing and watched them when they lost possession, it would be really interesting to watch him, how quickly he gets into great positions just to nick the ball, little toe pokes, just getting away from danger. He's so good at it. So that obviously ticks the box for fitting into the system. So obviously offensively he's great, but defensively, did he buy in? Absolutely. And they built the whole thing around it.
That kind of ties into stuff I know you were talking about last week about smaller players when they're kind of in their early teens. where not giving yourself, let's say, the excuse of I'm small, this is going to cause me problems, whereas you talk about learning how to use your body and being taught it from coaching point of view. And then you obviously mentioned not using it as an excuse. Like, he is obviously, I don't think anyone can disagree that David Silva was unbelievable on the ball, but that, like, defensive stat, and as Morgan's highlighted, linking it to that system of play that he plays in, how his application, essentially, we talked about talent, hard work last week. He has talent, he applied himself, and clearly, like as we said, with linking to the style of play, his work rate and
the system.
The tackling percentage, it is a really interesting one.
Looks to be a very likeable character too.
No trouble.
Apart from the last couple of weeks,
the Lazio
he's in a terrible situation at the moment. So.
But that's actually
he's a lovely guy. Yeah.
No, but you know what I mean.
Bailing on Lazio
over 12 years.
And you get the statue. He goes from having the statue in City to 2 days later seeing him getting slated for bailing on Lazio. That's hilarious.
But even with that's interesting. They always said about Silva and like Aguero, how you always get that with, like, especially with Gerrard, like South American players, like, come on, I think like Di Maria at United didn't like, let's say, the weather of Manchester, or like, because again, that's the England's not the nicest weather, for example, and you'd never hear anything from Aguero or Silva when he was obviously with City.
But I think that also comes down. Silva and Aguero performed for years. Di Maria came up and he was in a terrible United team, playing out of position, but he didn't perform. So it's very easy to then just go plugging like, this and that, whatever. But Di Maria is still an unbelievable player. Yeah, see him recently. He's on flames.
With PSG. Then kind of tying off some of the Silva stats. So he won 4 leagues. He got Player of the Month once and was in 1 or 2 teams of the year. Interestingly, there's a massive comparison with Gerrard. So 2 teams team of the year for Silva. Gerrard had 8 in his career.
It's mad.
And comparing it to Scholes had 3, and then Lampard had 3 as well.
It's crazy how the kind of style of play has changed. Also, Gerrard would have played in a flat 2, wouldn't he? Probably in a 4-4-2. Did they play 3 back in the day? Probably predominantly it would have been a 2. Probably would have been a 2. So like, his influence over games was crazy, considering they only had 2 players playing. Same with Lampard, scoring goals and stuff. Absolutely ridiculous, considering how deep they played and how defensively they played.
Lampard was in a 3.
Lampard was in a 3.
With Mourinho.
So that again, he fits into that system, and he almost revolutionised it. His breaking lines and scoring goals is unbelievable. It's interesting how Silva, maybe statistically with like goals, like 60 goals, it's good. Don't get me wrong. 93 assists, it's very, very good for the amount of time or amount of years he was there. But comparing him, like, if you were to go directly stat for stat with Gerrard, he wouldn't compare.
Yeah,
so
like
it's
Gerrard.
Interesting when you look at it like that, and even individual Gerrard would be statistically, or like the way he was ranked with all the player of the year and team of the year and all that type of stuff. So
it's interesting assist wise. So Silva obviously played 309, 93 assists. Gerrard played 504 games with 92 assists. Maybe 120 goals. He doubled his goals.
Yeah, the goal.
That just shows.
Responsibilities are much different in a Liverpool team with Steven Gerrard and a Manchester City team with David Silva. If responsibility is on him to score goals from deep areas, that's it. I guarantee you Silva's main contribution would have to be either facilitating possession and counter pressing as his main fundamental elements, and then obviously chipping in then with I'd say the creative aspects of killer passes.
Like like the amount of times I'd say he's played, it'd be an interesting thing to pull up. I'm sure someone has stats on it somewhere if you're really, really rooting for it. But they used to always play that when Clichy was there, and they used to do that overlap where they go inside. It's a bit like Messi with Jordi Alba, where they do that little inverted run. So that pass sets it, like kills the line, but it's not the assist, and then it's a cutback and it's a finish, or it might be another little combo. Unbelievable at it. It's like a basketball player who might not rank up loads of assists, but they draw pressure and they pop it. Like it's very, very interesting. So when you actually if you were to sit and watch some of his best games, he might not contribute to any goals in terms of statistics, but in terms of his link-up play and all that type of stuff, he's almost involved in every attack, I'd say. Yeah. And his breaking line passes and even how he gets involved in around the box, it's very, very interesting.
The point you made there is interesting with Silva being in a Man City team different to Liverpool. For example, Silva won 214 games with City. Gerrard won 255, which is 41 games short. 51 games, sorry, short. Quick maths. In 200 less games. Like that's why I actually picked that stat, because it's important to recognise that Gerrard was in a hit and miss Liverpool team at times, compared to, for example, Lampard won 349 games, and Scholes won 321. Yeah. And they have Lampard played more games than Gerrard, so it is important to highlight that with Gerrard. I think if Gerrard wins 4 leagues with Liverpool or whoever he plays with, let's say, that nearly does tip some of the kind of weight in his favour in terms of in that tree
in terms of individual influence over a team. Yeah. You look at like at that time, I'm trying to think of players who had a big influence in Liverpool at the time.
Sammy Hyypiä.
So Hyypiä and like John Reese and all them. But that wasn't
Peperina.
peak. They had some very good players, but it wasn't the peak moment. They weren't challenging really. Realistically,
they were dipping in.
They were great in Europe, but in terms of the Premier League, they kind of struggled, and that's why Gerrard almost ranks so well amongst them that individually he had to be 110 or they'd slip up like big time. Shout out to the slip I mentioned there.
Just play it over. It's on the video. This is actually because you were making a point about when people judge them, and were you mentioned talking about like ex-players who've played with them, saying like, well, even just people maybe older than us who were like, I've seen them in their day, they were this and this, and this stat here is going to highlight, just for example, the change in the style of play. So for example, people could say Gerrard was a better passer than, let's say, David Silva. If you're looking here as a stat, David Silva is 60.84 passes per game. Then you've got Gerrard 29.98, Scholes at 19.81, and Lampard had 21.8
per game.
So
60 passes per game.
That's nearly triple him. Gerrard's the closest, and he's still got half the amount. Now, that's not me saying that he's a better passer, but that directly highlights how much football has changed.
Like, especially that City team, and like the way they play.
Yeah, it's an interesting stat, to be fair, just to highlight that, like what she was saying.
But a Chelsea team with Mourinho, Manchester United team with Ferguson, and even Benitez as well. Like, it's with Gerrard, I'm trying to think of like that 04-05 era. A lot of that is direct style.
Absolutely.
Midfielders getting from breaking lines and supporting. So you can see that highlighted with the like a pass. Statistics are only as good as how you want to like match and merit them in regards to functions or things like that. I think the main ones are like contribution in the final third or contribution in your defensive third, but they are a great base to discuss. This is an interesting thing I'm going to throw here. To the naked eye, a Paul Scholes probably looks the better footballer compared to Steven Gerrard. I think that's why he gets a lot of praise, because of how beautiful he makes the game look. Same with David Silva, and this is what I meant. Even just back with our conversation about talent last week, the talent that Paul Scholes had in regards to making football look so easy is very attractive to the eye, whereas a Steven Gerrard, for example,
more robust almost, the way he played. He was
So I think the manner in which you play the game as well contributes to this.
That's what I was saying earlier with spectators. All of it is just opinion, because like even when we break into the stats here, there's no one right answer of who is the best of it, because if you could go into every statistic and every single thing, it's so difficult to rank them. I think appreciating the three of them, it's like appreciating Ronaldo and Messi now. Who's better? Like, who are we to say who's better? Like, there's no single statistic or single characteristic that just defines them as a better player. It's just kind of appreciate the three of them, like Scholes, Gerrard and Lampard. They're all ridiculous at the time. In their team, at that time, they were the best of the best. It's like people comparing Messi to Pele. Like, how do we know what it was like back then? We haven't a clue. We've no right to say, no, he wasn't good enough. You just watch a couple of clips on YouTube and you're an expert. Like, not a chance. It's what you said there is absolutely spot on. It's so difficult to rank and to like easily grade them without knowing the era. And even then, once you do that, once you can read into stats all you want, it's kind of comes down to opinion.
Would you say then that matters to you in terms of not even ranking these three, but how gifted the player looks or how natural they look on the football? Would that, if you were picking between two players?
No, but like we see football through a different lens compared to the average person. I know most people think they have an opinion in football, but they really don't. And as harsh as that is, and that's not to say that my opinion means anything. Like, I still, like, as a disclaimer, as I said on Instagram, like, this podcast is not just a tool for people to learn off, it's a tool for us to learn off. But just having this conversation will make us better coaches or better football lovers by the end of it. So like, in terms of opinion, I think that actually is a really good question.
Let me reframe it then. So we're two players.
It is a good question.
We'll say we're two Premier League players, and I'm the nicer footballer, we'll say. But we're the exact same, we'll say, stats wise, but I look more natural. I'm like Messi.
He was looking at you like, why is he not flip this and put the conversation about it?
Anyway.
He's fuming with that. Talk about egos earlier. That is an ego. Go on.
So anyway, two of us.
I look like an octopus. What are you on about?
Same stat wise, alright? And the only difference is I just look more natural with the football.
I think it does have.
Yeah.
So he's Lukaku.
You must value more.
This is the opinion thing. I think it is a swaying factor. To the uneducated eye, the person that looks prettier on the ball will be like, oh yeah, he's the better player. Whereas a coach would see it differently. They might love effectiveness in a player. They might love person that I think to really have an opinion of football, you have to be engrossed in it. At I'm going to say a high level, because at the end, the extremes is where it counts. So I would say to have an opinion, you have to be involved at the highest competitive level of a certain category, be it like senior football, 19s, 17s, 15s, 13s, just in this country, for example.
Then, playing devil's advocate with that, how are we in a position to talk about this, let's say?
That's just opinions. Anyone is open to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
I think what we're doing is that we're taking not just one aspect of the game, we're considering like 5 different total aspects and breaking each one of them down. Like we're still on David Silva.
just give it a platform.
Yeah, it's just because I'm sure people will go home and watch this, and I hope they do. That I would love if someone disagreed with us and had a pop off us in the comments, because it's interesting. It's all opinion. There's a debate to be had for every single conversation in football. Now, obviously, some things are just wrong. Now, that's when it's fact or not. But things like this, you could rank and average or like grade it as best you want, but no one has a significant answer that's the one right answer, and that's the beauty about football. Sometimes it's also the downfall of football, because everyone has an opinion, and a lot of them are difficult to, like, people voice their opinions an awful lot without actually having a lot of the things to go back on, without knowing. Stats obviously help, like we were saying, but they're not everything. So it's difficult to grade like era by era, and like we can put all the stats we want out here and all the different accolades. At the end of the day, it's just opinion. So like that's how we're doing it, and I think we're doing it the correct way with having every stat, and then also considering 5 different aspects, or even 6 aspects of the game.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, just as a side note for even listeners as well, I think what we're trying to do here is to give you a platform to analyse something. It's not just my opinion. You need to really break it down, and just I think one thing I'd like to come out of this podcast is not even just looking at players, but looking at like life in general. You can break it into so many different aspects. What I'm saying is, don't just formulate your opinion based on your first look. Don't be afraid to look at the grander scale. There's more to life than a player on the football pitch. Like, for example, being culturally significant, looking pretty on the eye compared to others. There's a lot of swaying factors. Just don't jam your opinion in somebody's throat. People see the beautiful game differently.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I would be curious. I'd ask the audience to even rank each one that we put, to let us know what you actually think. Like, would you rank David Silva? If you don't, please let us know, and why. I would love to know why, because every conversation, like every debate that we can have is going to be interesting, because you could say something that completely sparks something for us that we never thought of. Small little things like that. It's important and we love it as well, constant engagement. People disputing, I think people are scared in comments and stuff to disagree with what you say, but I'd actually love to hear it, and hear that I didn't like, or I didn't really agree with what you said there. I'd love to hear that, because it would spark a whole different thing for us, and we might think about something completely different
for next week.
Then you approach it in a whole different way the next week. Like, we could go back and listen to this and go, even something I could say and be like, no, I actually, now that I think about it, there's something that I think that's why when you talk about things and opinions, people come out with things too quickly, and then they're not even thinking about things. We've considered most things here, but are we correct? Absolutely not. I think it's open. I think it's good. We've talked about it for a while, but it's good that we're open about that. Like, our answer or our judgment, is it 100% correct? Absolutely not. But we're trying to cover most boundaries. I think it's important to note.
This is completely actually off the topic of this podcast, but it's from us doing this last week. It's interesting putting yourself on, obviously, a mic, say, on a camera, and putting your opinion out there, because once it's out there, it's like, if you're wrong, you get told you're wrong by 10 people, you're probably wrong. You know,
we're in the learning curve here. At least we're putting ourselves out here to the point where we want to be better at this sort of engagement. We want to be better in terms of football. We want to be able to converse in a conversation. If I ever thought that you'd be doing a podcast with me last year, absolutely not. This is one thing I've always wanted to do. Funny enough, I actually had a note on my phone from 2014 or 15 but geez, I'd love to do a podcast. But it's mad like where life takes you. But back to the stats, that was a nice off-topic conversation.
It's like its own little episode. People are probably actually surprised that, given the amount of airtime we gave him last week, Mark Noble isn't in this debate. Mark was in half the episode last week. I mean, we were probably unanimously in agreement there that David Silva is in that level.
He's definitely in amongst it.
You could argue, is 309 games, that is enough. That is enough, I think.
I think that's and just the impact he had while he was there is a huge.
If you play 30 games a year for 4 years, that's only 120 appearances. That's 4 years.
Only
if you can be at the top of the top for 4 years, you've got it. Like you've done something correctly. So for him to play 309 games, that's ridiculous. Like I probably played 50 in the youth career. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's absolutely crazy, and that's only the Premier League. Like you're not even considering when he was at Valencia and stuff. It's crazy.
And cup, like this isn't taking into account cup competitions, so to speak, and Europa or Champions League. Even at that, Lampard had 609 games. Like that's like nearly double. It's ridiculous. We're going to talk about a couple of different midfielders. These obviously played a lot less games, and kind of again talk about them. The first one I have is written here is Yaya Toure, and the main reason he's here is basically he was almost like a lesser version of what Cantona was to United back in the 90s, where they brought Cantona in, United did at the time, and it was like the switch that obviously led to the success they had after that. Like Yaya Toure was
the man. He was the man.
He came in. Stats wise, 230 games, 62 goals, a lot of big goals.
I think he was the switch that City needed to become a winning team, because they were so good for so while. Like, do you remember they were signing like Robinho and Rocky Santa Cruz and the boys, and they were getting nowhere. Like they had the money, but he was the switch that all of a sudden they go, right, we can start winning games now. Although he's only got 62 goals and 32 assists. I wish we had that one season where he just like
the free kicks and
destroyed
the cup
he absolutely destroyed the whole year. So that impact on that season in that system with that team, he revolutionised City.
And interesting.
And then from there it goes on.
68.45 passes, which is just about 8 more than David Silva passes per game. And that was probably a more direct City team than the City team now.
And also those 62 goals, I wonder how many were game winners, clutch moments.
He was a big game player. Big game player. And a completely different player to anyone I've seen for a while. Like who plays similar? He's got the build. Pogba. He's quite similar to Pogba. Pogba's more athletic though. He didn't cover much ground, but he was unbelievable on the ball. He was he's built a little bit like Vieira. And built a little bit like
more like laid back. Very unique.
He's like horizontal when he goes around. He's just cruising around the pitch. I think he was great to watch. I don't think anyone didn't like him at the time. He's a good character as well, like him and Colatore. But cultural impact, huge,
massive,
huge on in the system. Anyway. Perfect. He worked perfectly in that system when they won the league. That like triggered, like we were saying, a new City, a new revolution. Then. For those other couple of years, I personally wouldn't rank him among the three, purely because he wasn't there for long enough and wasn't consistent enough for the years that he was there. Like he only had 230 appearances, it's quite a lot, but out of them, that probably season and maybe moments in 2 or 3 other seasons, but that's not consistent enough to be ranked among them. But he's in the conversation because of that impact he had in that year, even how good of a player he was anyway. But
what would be minimum appearances then? 300? That's enough longevity, would we say?
300's an awful lot. Like 230, I'd do that if he won the Premier League 4 years in a row and was a huge impact on it, but he wasn't. Like when they won it that year, he was unbelievable.
And then the last year he won it was so he won it 3 times. He won it.
But even like, was he a huge that one year? He had a huge. What year was that? I'm terrible for years in football.
I remember they won the FA Cup that year as well. I'm desperate for picking years.
But anyway, the influence he had at that time was massive, and then I think that's why he's in the conversation at least. But do you rank him amongst the 3?
No, but and it's not just the 3. I'm thinking Vieira, Keane. Like just as you were talking, I was thinking, because just when I said there previously about a top 10, I was like if I had those midfielders at my disposal, would I choose Yaya Toure?
No, not a chance.
Would he make the bench? Probably not. So look, worthy of a conversation, not worthy of a list placement.
Yeah.
No,
Would David Silva then make it into your? So let's say you were picking a Premier League 11 since the first year of Premier League. What was that? 1992. Whatever
Two,
it was.
I think.
It was 92.
No clue.
So would he make it into your match day squad? So starting 11, bench.
I think that's a whole different podcast conversation.
But like that's what I was thinking. Because like Yaya Toure wouldn't make it near
short
mine.
list of players. Remember the draft that we done
He would
last
be,
month.
he would be amongst it. He'd be definitely in the conversation.
But Toure wouldn't.
No,
Probably not.
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so.
Then the last two we're going to finish with are two obviously still currently playing. They've played a lot less games and they're two completely different footballers. So Kevin De Bruyne.
Give him another 155 appearances. The impact he's had in 155 appearances is madness. But I think he needs another year or two to really. Now, does he technically and physically, does he rank at the moment?
Yeah.
Absolutely. If he maintains what he's doing now, consistency, if he can keep it up, debatably could be one of the.
Compared to Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes, David Silva, he's probably the most all-around.
Most rounded.
He's like a mix of them all, isn't he?
Yeah.
In a way, he's got a bit of everything.
Chip and all that shit. He's a chip from all of them. But again, I think to be a Premier League great, you cannot just be a good footballer. You have to have more. And this is the big thing about the cultural significance of the league. People are not going to put him in the bracket of a conversation between Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes. Now, I think obviously that's pushed more so because they're English players in an English league driven by English media. But the main thing about KDB would be natural ability with application and ruthlessness on a football pitch. It's undeniable. Unfortunately, I can't see him playing another 155 games for Man City.
That's just Premier League games.
Interesting.
I can't see him staying in the Premier League.
That's another 5 years of 30-game seasons.
Now somebody's going to break the bank, to be fair, but if Pep stays, I reckon he will. But actually
next year is huge.
But even a big stat there, like if you double that, so he's lost 22 games. If you double that, so it goes to 310, and say he lost 44 games, but then that's ridiculous.
That's outrageous.
That is ridiculous.
And Man City, by all accounts, had an under par year this year.
And
so those 22
and he
losses
won player of the year,
that.
didn't he? Won player of the year.
Yeah. And even like you look at you obviously talked a lot. I know you talked about it last week, talking about contributing to attacking like phases as being
within your role.
But remember you were saying about that being like a valuable remember talking about being a goal scorer, and you were just saying basically contributing to attack. 150 games, 36 goals, 66 assists. Like that's over 100 contributions to goals in 155 games. Like that means every game he plays, he's like.
They're big.
Every game and a half he plays.
That's not even the facilitated sets that you were talking about.
That's a little every game and a half
into the fullback and he delivers. They are prime stats.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Without him, that ball's not going in the back of the net.
All set pieces, physically unbelievable. Covers so much ground. Is a good leader, it seems, because he seems like a very good person as well.
In the Man City training videos.
I love how quiet he is as well. He's a bit like Messi in terms of in the media. He's not huge.
Yeah.
He seems to have a really big personality when he's interviewed. Like he seems to really care. I remember watching, I think it was something on City TV, and he's slagging Aguero, just saying he's the worst trainer in the world. Like, but he says he doesn't care as long as he scores the weekend. But when he misses, he says he hates him because you can't be that type of player and not get results. And I kind of like that in De Bruyne. Like. When you're talking about does he get ranked amongst the best, like because he's not English, and then does personality have a bit to do with it as well?
Huge. Same thing with Scholes, with the likability of the football player. It's the exact same as a person.
That's what I was going to say.
People are social creatures, and if you do not fit the bracket socially, you are frowned upon.
I don't think De Bruyne
that goes into team selection. Roy Keane, for example, but people, that's a different one. It's kind of like a cult hero. People love that, like old hard hitting tackling. People going off on a mad one, but people love that. But you know what I mean by the likability and what they look like on the eye. I think it's a huge part.
The eye, he's
as a player 100%. I think that's undisputed, regardless of what your performance your appearances are. As a football player, he's in that rank. But in regards to a Premier League legend or great,
you need to have played.
I think he needs a couple more. He needs a couple more years. If he destroys next year, you're looking at a different conversation because City are not a great place at the moment. I know they still done decent considering their poor start last year, but now with Liverpool, good recruitment so far. If they can beat Liverpool to the league next year, like that's a huge.
And if he plays a big part,
in it, it's a huge.
When your back's against the wall and you still be able to perform, that's another.
Liverpool in a situation now where they could run away with the world, like United did for years in Europe, at home, win the Premier League, winning cups. They could go and win a treble next year. They could. Now, who's going to stop them? It has to be City, I think.
But that back to the wall thing is a huge thing for our next player, because he performed when everything was backs to the wall. And
I think we're all in agreement there with De Bruyne about just how good he is. As a great point.
As a great, then as you said, if he does really well the next 2 years and they win, let's say, a league and maybe a cup, and even if they won the Champions League, for example, then I think he's in it. Even if that only gets him over 200 Premier League appearances, I think for how complete he is, I think that's enough. Last one, and this is a bit left field, and there's only one reason I put this one in, and there's a stat I'm going to read out to start off. So it's N'Golo Kante. Thrown back to the Silva tackling stat, where it was 380 tackles in 309 games. Kante in 164 games has made 533 tackles. Ridiculous. With 411 interceptions.
That is. Well, Kante's a huge conversation, because the problem with Kante is that he's so refined to what he is, whereas Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard, Toure, De Bruyne, they are multi-dimensional, and they have everything at their disposal within the team. The team is based around their attributes. They're the big players.
That's modern football, isn't it? Where it's more specialist roles.
Yeah.
Back in the day, like, you could be a bit of a jack of all trades, should I say? Whereas De Bruyne's obviously a bit of like a one in a billion kind of shout. It's kind of like that with modern football, where everyone has their role in that system, and they just
But would you consider N'Golo Kante one of the single best defensive midfielders of all time
in Premier League? Like, in the Premier
League? Because I've watched them for so much, I would, but we never seen Makelele, we never seen Vieira properly, enough to go. Like, Kante is currently our Makelele. Like, back in the day, he revolutionised it. Kante, I think what gives him a good shout is that for players like him, they generally get overlooked for when teams win leagues and all this. So obviously you had Vardy and Mahrez on Flames when Leicester won it, but without Kante I don't think they win the league.
No, 100%.
So that's an influence from a defensive player. I know it's easy to say Liverpool this year, Van Dijk and Alisson, because they're so directly involved in the defensive side, but to be a midfielder and to have such 533 tackles in 164 games, that is absolutely ridiculous. The influence he has over that Leicester team, and then to go to Chelsea the next year and win it again, I think it's just a testament to the type of player he is. The influence you can have of knowing your role within a system and doing it week in, week out is as valuable as the likes of De Bruyne contributing to whatever amount of goals.
And being an excellent footballer and at the same time.
Yeah.
And
he's a great guy as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that's another one. He looks like a really nice guy. Smile,
likability.
Likability.
He's got a huge personality without saying anything, which is interesting.
I don't know. It's obviously
likability. I think being a Premier League great, I think a big thing you need to remember is the game is rooted. Likability is not going to make you a Premier League great. No. But what it does do is, you were talking there about contributing to the defensive aspect. Like, if his role is very simply to break up play and get the ball to his match-winning players, case closed.
Yeah. And does he do it? Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. Case closed. He's a unique one compared to the
playing right wing for a while, like playing like a defensive right winger, and does he do it? Yeah, he makes it look good. Like, it's so weird how he does it.
Football's a results game, and unfortunately he doesn't make the big results.
He doesn't
directly impact. Yeah.
But I that's not that's not an untold story. People know that defenders are, for lack of a better word, unappreciated. You know, because when it comes to the big awards, it's for the big moments, and the big moments in this sport seem to be the offensive stuff. Nothing to do with
sport, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's why you paid the money.
But then to go watch. The first thing I said at the start, consistency. He's been there. I know last year he was injured for a while, so he probably has less appearances than he should, but his consistency over the Leicester year was outrageous, unbelievable. Again the next year for Chelsea, and even when they've been kind of in and out of the highlight for the last while, he's still been so good. Like, apart from his injuries, who's a better defensive player in the world at the moment
as a midfielder,
in a central area?
As a midfielder,
Like
at top level.
There's not many that play similar.
There's
Like
not
Casemiro plays similar.
He was very good. Yeah, he was very good as well. But it's just the way he plays is kind of unique. He's kind of made it a whole new style, being a real energetic 6 rather than the big Vieira, tough, hard man. He wins tackles and he makes it look nice. He's like a cat the way he springs around. It's unbelievable. Yeah. So I think he deserves to be in the conversation. A couple more years. Give him a couple more years. I think 2 years. If he can stay consistent over the next couple of years with Chelsea. I just don't like him in Chelsea. Don't know what it is. I'd love him in United.
Is that a bias thing though?
No. I just don't like him in Chelsea. I loved him when he was at Leicester, and he was great the next year for Chelsea again. I don't know if it's a bias thing. I don't know why. I just don't like him in Chelsea. Yeah, I don't know where else he could play at the moment, because I don't think he plays anywhere else.
I wouldn't put him in the bracket for a Premier League grade.
I don't think so.
A Premier League grade, I think you need to have it all, and I don't think he has it all.
I don't think he has it all either.
The amount of times I've seen him receive possession and to be absolutely careless is an understatement.
Yeah. And to be the type of player he is, I don't think you can be like that.
It's too specific, I think.
There's a lot of specific players.
Yeah, but I think
to be a great, I think you need to have
be rounded. I think that's why
But then Ronaldo was great, but he was great when it came to just, let's say, the attacking side of the game.
But he was so good at it. Like, he is so good at it. There's a difference when he is literally the top of the top year in, year out.
Yeah.
Well, Kante, that's probably why the conversation it goes a little bit underappreciated, because of the type of player he is. But like you need to be kind of well rounded. Like De Bruyne is well rounded. Silva, he is, because we brought up his defensive stats. But if you take that out of it,
in the system he is.
Yeah. So it's interesting when you kind of rank. Like, I think Kante is too like niche, specific to what he is. That does not make him a
bad player.
That's why he's in the conversation. He wouldn't be in the conversation with that. But I think you're right in saying that he's not well rounded enough to be there yet. Now for 2 years, next 2 years, he can change his game or just be unbelievable again defensively, and then
I think he's in the 1%, but he's not in the 1% of the 1%.
It's a nice way of putting it.
It's a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
I think that's correct. So I think we agree with all of them.
Yeah, to be fair.
Yeah, they're a good conversation. Is there anyone we're missing? I wonder. Let us know.
It's mad when we were thinking about this. It always went to City midfielders, because the last 10 years.
You're only talking
we're only talking from Gerrard on, and like,
so what you're talking
Scholes,
like
Lampard.
Early 2000s, like 2002 onwards.
No, like since they've played. So when did
beyond that era? So who's the last one retired? Gerrard,
Scholes, Lampard would have been the last.
Yeah.
So we're talking like, I'm going to guess 2013. That might be completely wrong. But from that era onwards.
See, City have won a lot of leagues since then. So
they've been the most dominant.
That's why.
That's why they're in the conversation.
That's
why they're
here's a smart right. Here comes the rise of Liverpool Football Club. Who are you going to put in the next few years in that bracket? Well, they signed Thiago potentially.
They've won the league.
Currently in their midfield tree.
Yeah.
No.
Why though? Because that's a Champions League.
It's changed. Premier League. Look at the influence.
I'm going to bring out his bias here, by the way.
I'm absolutely being biased. But when you look at standout performances, the front three of Liverpool have been ridiculous for the last couple of years.
Okay, yeah.
Like ridiculous. So like on a new wavelength of just consistency. The three of them. Firmino might not statistically rank up there, but he's still involved.
You're talking about huge responsibilities in a role.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think the Liverpool's role is to win games. I think it's just to facilitate and make sure the game doesn't go away from them. And they do it.
You think the midfield?
The midfield three. I don't think any of the midfield three rank even close to these. I think Fabinho's a great player. I think Gini's a great player. I don't rank Henderson in there, although he's had a good year, but still, does he rank? I don't think he's even in the conversation, any of them. Now, can that change? Yes.
Is that purely down to the way Liverpool are playing?
Yes,
currently?
absolutely. It's down to the system, but that's why they win. So in their system, yes, they're doing great, but they're not standout enough for me to be ranked in here.
Okay, so a second question. So just to clarify for the listeners per se, so if you take Liverpool at the moment, their main units would be their. Now, to be fair, to be a top team, you need to have all your units clicking.
Yeah.
But they're where the nucleus of their most important players are in the front three and the back four.
Yes.
For Lampard's Chelsea, it was kind of
a spine.
I would say
Lampard,
a spine.
Perry, check.
A spine.
And then everything else that was good around. Don't get me wrong.
Manchester United. in that era was a spine too, to be fair.
Well,
it was a bit of everything,
you're thinking like Ronaldo, Rooney, Tevez,
and then Gerrard was solely
he was a one-man show pretty much for a while.
I tell you what, if they had him now, they could be. It's because they're so reliant in the way they play on their full-backs and their front three and their attacking outlet.
Like, I think the full-backs in Liverpool now do what the midfield three would have done back in the day.
There's a new way of attacking
and they revolutionised it. Maybe in 10 years down the line, full-backs are now like the centre mids. Like people saying, like it's interesting to say that, people saying that you can put Trent in the middle of the park now because the way that a completely different game. It doesn't suit that style of play at all. It doesn't work. They don't go central, they go wide because it works, and they're unbelievable at it, and it's almost impossible to
people
stop.
Don't realise as well.
People don't realise. You just pluck that and make it work.
You can go past the ball, put in the middle. It doesn't work like that.
Does not work like that.
He's playing passes facing the opposition's goal
from a wide area.
And also,
his diagonals are beautiful, but put him in the middle of the park, it's a different game. It does not work. It does not work. Like,
the middle of the park is hell. It's chaos. Nobody likes chaos.
No.
Well, actually, here's one for you.
Oh God.
About chaos.
Mark Noble.
Throw him in the mix.
No. Oh God. The best players rise from chaos.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's definitely
good. Without chaos, there's no order.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's what we talked about last week.
Yin and yang. But if you take, actually, can you pull this image up by the way when we're doing it? Do you know the yin and yang symbol with black? If you take the white in that wall, you come with the last comment. What I'm trying to say is the white is the chaos, but the whole with the opposite colour is. It's the dying. And I think it was too poetic.
It's like he said about Talon last week, where it's like when they're put in the bad environment, when they're in the chaos, the talent.
That's where it rises.
Yes, that's where the bad environment is chaos. It's not like a
It's like
that's what I meant. Thank you. That's why there's three of us, because three brains are better than one.
Tune in next week for Shaolin Soccer.
What am I thinking about? Like,
please watch that film. It's fantastic.
Roll a couple of clips from that, your man doing the 360s and keeping the ball at the bottom.
I mean,
it's so funny.
Let us know. I want to know if we've missed anyone, or if you can, like, would you consider over the next couple of years, are those Liverpool players in it, the midfield three, even if they recruit, if they get Thiago, and if he influences over the next 2 years, he could change how Liverpool play altogether. So it'd be interesting to see over the next couple of years, does anyone earn the right to be in there? Does Kante continue as he is? Does De Bruyne continue as he is?
It was exciting to come up through.
Is there anyone, even just a little shout before that, is there anyone that could have that influence right now? He's very young, like Phil Foden.
The problem with young players, and it's the same with underage players from 9, 10, 11, 12, all they are is a bucket of potential. That is it.
Think about Jack
Wilshere. But that's why they're exciting. It's potential. That's why there's a lot, even in American football, NCAA basketball, people love potential.
The hype. They love the young
potential.
I just thought we missed out when he's a City player as well. Fernandinho.
That's a great.
I don't think he ranks.
Is he kind of like Kante?
He's like Kante, but unbelievable again. Unbelievable.
Just popped in my head.
Probably worth the mention. Yes.
Not as a great though.
No, he's not as a great, but he's a.
With those five main outlines off the top of my head, I'm thinking,
Fernandinho, is he in there?
Again,
he is like.
It's a 1%, but he's not on the 1%.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
But you can name any player and just go back. But it's the same with anything. And this is like opinions. People have ingrained opinions instantly. If you say a name of a player, you already have an opinion. Done. Like, even without breaking into stats. So maybe like going with your gut sometimes with players. It
all comes back. What do you value in a player? What do you actually enjoy? Do you like the X factor? Do you like someone who looks good in the eye? I love Scholes because he was unbelievable to watch. Like, he looked like everything was in slow motion. Well, I probably, as younger, I didn't appreciate Gerrard as much because he was like robust, like you said. But now that I take a back seat, the contribution.
You're looking at football through a different lens now.
Absolutely, it changes probably.
You're once a player, you're once a coach.
And
also we're very young still. Like, you're
so much
21, 24. Got a lot of learning still. So
we'll probably.
I think that was good. We'll wrap it up there. I want to know though, if anyone does have anyone in mind from the three boys here, the English lads since Lampard, Gerrard and Scholes.
So say from 2010.
Does anyone else ranking there in the Premier League? Or is there anyone even worth a shout? I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
But think, final note, do you think influential figures are a thing of the past? I think you're looking at 11 top grade players in every team now, not just like in basketball you have your superstars. I don't think it's a dying breed now. Once you take Messi and Ronaldo out,
see what happened to Barca against Bayern.
Bar Lewandowski, Thiago, like they're not on the same level as Messi or Ronaldo.
No,
they're excellent footballers,
and there's a team like,
but the team
Kimmich and everyone is
it's
just
the 11.
Like
there's no weak link in that Bayern.
Yeah,
does an 11 beat one? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So maybe the role of your Scholes, your Gerrard, and your Lampard is
a dying breed.
And all them conversations will be like Kante, and everyone's too niche to nearly be to
but
be
you said that football is becoming more niche.
Know your niche.
Is that the future of football?
Could be. Yeah.
That's the podcast topic.
Right, we'll wrap this up.
We'll stop the waffle. We could go on for another 4 hours.
So as Morgan said, obviously, comments, let us know what you think, especially if we missed anyone from like 2010 to like now. Other than that, obviously, if you're watching YouTube again, reiterate, just like, subscribe, and then on
it goes a huge.
We do really appreciate it, any kind of support, and obviously any feedback, like the first episode, fire it our way. And then if you're listening to it on the other platforms, Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, a review you can leave a review and rate it.
Even DM us on Instagram, anything, any sort of engagement, we love it, we feed off it, so we really appreciate all the support.
So
brilliant.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.